as a cultivator of cannabis, compost, I think, is a really essential ingredient for the best kind of cannabis. I started learning about cultivating cannabis working indoors, and I wanted to grow my own because I was diagnosed with glaucoma back in the early 90s, and the medications that are available for treatment of glaucoma made me pretty ill, to say the least. And so for the better part of 20-some years, I've been controlling my optometric pressure with cannabis, and as part of that work, I found a specific cultivar, as we call them, that's known today as Harlequin, and it led me into what medical cannabis really is about. Most of us, I know for myself, a good portion of my life, my interactions with cannabis were what would be referred to as recreational today. And quite honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with recreating, and I think it actually has great therapeutic value, but that's a whole nother conversation for a different day. What medical has come to mean to me is working with, let's see, how's this? Okay, small button? Okay, cool. That's a picture of the garden that I had last year, the entrance to it. Part of what you'll notice is there's all kinds of different plants there. There's comfrey, clary sage, there's some beans, some corn, and some cannabis. And what I have found after working years indoors, and I can revisit the whole indoor thing because I'm guessing most of your customers are urban types, right? Yes? So I'll revisit that quick. But I have some pretty pictures here, and in my garden, the only supplements that we use in the soil is compost that we make on site. And I make it on site because I want to know the source, the feedstock that goes into my compost piles. And that's a thing that if you're going to offer compost for medical practitioners, medical cultivators, I would ask you to really pay attention to what things go into that compost, because cannabis is a bioaccumulator. It takes heavy metals out of the soils that it's in. It tends to concentrate them in the roots and the stems, but it's an issue. The other thing that's a bit of an issue for a cultivator of what I am referring to as medical cannabis is the importance of no contaminants. In this garden, the only thing that's put on the soil, you'll notice there's a bunch of mulch in there. The only thing that's put on the soil once the plants are in the ground is water. And water is an issue for a lot of urban cultivators because most all water that we get out of a tap is treated with chemicals that are intended to kill what makes compost alive. It's a bit of a problem. There are ways that you can treat chlorinated water or chloramined water to allow the beneficial microorganisms that actually go about feeding the plants. And that's what compost is. Compost that's suitable for medical cannabis cultivation would be full of lots of microbes and what I call micro and macro organisms, and they go about creating a healthy environment in the soil. I'm really a big fan of how nature wants a plant to be. Cannabis is a very elastic plant. It is literally a weed. It will grow anywhere it's given the opportunity. When you really when it comes into its own is when the circumstances of the plant's life are everything that the plant needs in exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. Nature can do that. Way too many cannabis cultivators, and these are waste streams that you have to deal with in urban environments, are things like rock wool cubes and the nutrients that are mixed into water and then dumped into sewage systems. Plant waste. There are people who don't know what to do with their leftover plant material when they've got roots and stems, and so they dump them on the side of the road. Cannabis has been an industry that, in my entire life, it's basically been, you could go to prison for even having one joint, and there were no rules in the cannabis work other than don't get caught. And if you want to keep doing business, don't burn the person you're doing business with. Make sure they're happy. Well, what's coming is an incredible array of rules for cannabis cultivation. In my opinion, most of the people who grew cannabis outdoors or indoors last year, 2 years from now won't be doing that. They might be doing it on a personal scale. The requirements associated with the new Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, as well as ALMA, the recently passed legislation, the permit fees and whatnot, the price of cannabis at the retail level likely will not go down at all. It may even go up. And meantime, the farmers will probably get, the people who are actually growing the plants and caring for them, will probably get, I saw a RAND Corporation study that estimated that the wholesale price of cannabis 2 years after the passage of ALMA would be $30 an ounce for dried trimmed flowers, which is $400.80 a pound. And trimmers get paid $150 to $200 a pound, and $200 a pound is not very much for indoor cultivation especially. But I'm kind of wandering here. This is a picture of a close-up. You guys have gotten a lot of information today. Part of what I wanted to share with you is the purity of the compost that you offer. Ideally, it would be full of life and relatively free of pharmaceuticals or other materials that cannabis could bioaccumulate and have in the plant when they're finished with their process. This is a plant, high CBD, low THC. It's called ACDC. I was doing a little experiment this summer. I've discovered that it grows really well in cool conditions. In the heat of 95-degree afternoons in the area that I live, it does not do well at all. It's more like a fern. But you see right there in the background, Swiss chard. And meantime, this plant was one of 4 that I put in the ground in June, which is really late, and there were political reasons to do with our county, basically an outdoor ban that we overturned. And so I put plants in the ground last summer. June 20th, 4 of these little plants went in the ground. They were about this big. They got nothing but water, but they were in the shade until the 1st of September. And it was about 10 or 15 degrees cooler in there than the surrounding garden. Those 4 plants got to be not quite as tall as I am and considerably bigger around than I am. The 4 of them produced 7,200 and some odd grams of dried plant material. And out of that, my medicine makers made more than 1 kilo of high potency CBD, virtually no THC oil that we offer to some of the patients that I work with. I'm actually a cultivator that has a large and active patient group. So this is another shot of the garden, some collard greens. Again, no nutrients of any kind other than the compost that I make on site for our thing. And what I think is really important for all of you is that you can educate the public that you're trying to serve about compost and its benefits. People who want to grow cannabis are going to have to learn how to decrease their cost of operation significantly if they want to keep doing their work. And compost is a very simple way to get these kind of, oh, it didn't get in there. I was going to show you some eye candy. A friend of mine took some shots of some of the flowers last year that were heavily involved with trichome development, but they're not here. So now, this is what I'm doing these days. In my county, the local jurisdiction has forbidden any cultivation of cannabis and any commercial activity associated with cannabis. So I've, in conjunction with the parent of this young boy on the left-hand side, his name is Silas. Silas suffers from Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a particularly intractable form of epilepsy. And I like him. He's a nice little kid, but this epilepsy is trying to kill him. The way Forrest describes it is, he said, imagine, up until the time Silas was 5, he was having a very normal little boy life. And then he started seizing, and now he's 8, and Forrest says, imagine if at any time, day or night, a stranger could come into your home and take a taser to your child and keep doing it, and you can't stop it. And cannabis has, in fact, helped Silas at one point, and I have in my patient group 4 other children who, all 4 of them have benefited from it, from cannabis. Silas, last spring, we had a plant that an oil was made from, and he went from having, over a week, an average of about 80 seizures a day, and that's 24 hours a day, anytime the taser comes on and your kid is seizing. On a Friday evening, we gave him oil, like from the plant that I showed you earlier, and he had no seizures on Saturday or Sunday, and that continued for 4 months and 10 days. But in our county, the ban came into effect, and the gardens and nurseries got raided by the sheriff, and that particular plant we don't have access to anymore. And since then, back around between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we got about 3 weeks of relief from seizures. But as we speak, Silas is very challenged. And so the Caladrius Network, I'm getting involved with a bunch of folks who are in this industry and want to help kids like this. We have the network has right now about 25 patients that we work with. Silas is the only one of those that's in my particular patient group. And those kids are all over the country. And we provide guidance and cannabis therapies to these kids at no cost. And we can do that because the cannabis cultivators that we work with and the nurserymen and the manufacturers are willing to donate their work to the network so that these kids can get that at no cost. And so I'd really encourage you, this is what I'm doing now, because the county said I can't do what I really love to do, which is nursery work. But compost is an essential part of how I'm asking the cultivators to work with cannabis in the context of making medicine for kids like Silas. And if you want to see a really compelling story, check out there's a website, caladriusnetwork.org, and I have a website at houseofharlequin.org. And it looks like it's time for questions.
Thank you, Wade, for bringing us this very, clearly emotional, very personal story. In our industry, there's a lot of effort to push a lot of compostable materials out of the trash, or sometimes even trying to compost trash or digest trash in some way. And then there's an effort to try to keep that source separated and to move that into the compost stream. But we're also pushing a lot of plasticized papers and other materials into that compost. So I'd like to take the first question. Would any of that interest you at all?
If I could wave a magic wand and we could create a demand for it, there would be a marketplace for what I would call medically standards prepared compost that was suitable for cannabis cultivation for medicine. And then there's other compost that's suitable for amending your trees and because nobody's smoking your trees or we're not making oils from tomatoes. But we are making oils from these plants.
So we have time for one question. I'd like to encourage a question that focuses on compost quality. Does someone have a question on that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious about whether you tried to work with other farmers on this topic and get them to compost on site or to use compost rather than fertilizers.
Yes. I am. I've taken it on as my work trying to educate people on what I'm calling medical standards for cannabis. It's not about the kind of cannabis it is, because I have patients who are Iraq and Afghanistan vets who get a lot of benefit out of something called Gorilla Glue. But they're able to sleep, and one kid doesn't have ulcers anymore. And he's one of the few patients I have that actually smokes. But most of them, again, are taking concentrates. And did I answer your question?
No, that's the collaboration.
The collaboration part of it, I'm really trying to, I'm doing a presentation on Thursday, 2 hours for a large group of cultivators in Nevada County, because in fact, most people who work with cannabis are what I call cultivators. They have a recipe and they follow that recipe, and it means going to the store and they buy all these things and these jugs and bags. And to me, it's important for cannabis farmers to become farmers. Farmers go to the store and buy things sometimes, but more often than not, farmers that are successful learn how to generate the inputs they need to be successful right on their own property. And I think that a small-scale farm, even in a suburban environment, if the homeowners association allows it, could work. And I think it's important. Part of what I love about the compost thing and all this recycling that y'all are doing, and thank you, by the way, for doing it, we really have, this planet is the only one we got, and we need to start paying attention to how we're treating it. Just saying.
Thank you so much. Thank you.